Hello, everyone. Welcome to our panel today on Reclaiming Our Joy, Celebrating Our Right to Happiness. I'm Raymond Patton. I'm the Faculty Director of the Honors Program here at John Jay. Welcome, students. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, audience. And of course, thank you to our collaborators at the New York Philharmonic and our panelists. So in our discussion today, we're going to hear a bit about the struggle for justice and how so often fighting for justice stifles our experience of joy, something so central to the human experience. What better way to recapture joy, though, than through music? So I will turn it over to our moderator, Toya Lillard, educator and activist, who will bring some of the panelists in to chat about this. Those in the audience, if you have questions or comments, you can post them in the chat and we'll address them as they come. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to the panel.
Thank you so much, Raymond. It is wonderful to be here with you today. My name is Toya Lillard. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm calling in from Brooklyn, New York, on the unceded land of the Lenape Canarsie people. I invite you to name your pronouns in the chat or to rename yourself and to put into the chat where you're calling in from so that we can acknowledge that we are all on stolen land. It is my pleasure to be here today to discuss and just think about joy, reclaiming joy, particularly in these times. It is strange, sometimes awkward to think about reclaiming joy in a time where so many people are struggling and having so many difficulties and hardships, where there's so much uncertainty in the world and discord, to be quite honest. And we know that studying social movements, studying activist movements, and studying the ways that cultural change has happened, that the arts have played an integral role in folks claiming and reclaiming their joy. And so it's my pleasure to really think about this topic with three genius artists. And I want to bring them up now and have them introduce themselves. And I'm going to ask them some hard questions about joy as it relates to their artistic praxis. And then I'm going to ask you, students, some questions about how you're finding joy in these times. So I'd like to introduce you to our brilliant genius artists, activists on the panel with me, Rashida Phillips, Joel Thompson, and Anthony Roth Costanzo. I want to hold space for them to introduce themselves. And I want to start off with Rashida Phillips, just partly selfishly because I'm so impressed and deeply influenced by your work. Rashida.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be part of this panel and with you all. So my name is Rashida. I am based currently in Tongva, also known as Los Angeles, but originally in my home and my heart is in Philadelphia, also known as Lenape, Wengohaken land. I do a lot of different things, but my main sort of work is as I'm director of housing at an organization called Policy Link, which is a national research and policy-based organization who serves the 100 million people who are at or below the poverty line. But prior to doing that work, I just started at Policy Link about 2 months ago. Prior to that, I spent most of my career in Philadelphia as an attorney working at an organization called Community Legal Services, where I represented people facing loss of their homes, primarily homeowners, but a lot of also primarily renters, facing eviction, facing loss of their housing vouchers, being displaced, and then doing policy work that touches all of those different issues. In addition to that, I'm also an Afrofuturist artist, interdisciplinary artist. I'm part of a collective called Black Quantum Futurism with my partner, More Mother, who's a musician, who does rap, hip hop, jazz, poetry, all sorts of different things. And as part of our interdisciplinary collective, we really think about Afrofuturism, but about the time element of Afrofuturism. And so we think about temporality, how Black communities in particular create time together, create space, reclaim time and space, how they build rituals and resistance to the notion that we don't make it into the future, very literally, right? Because of the different ways in which violence impacts Black people, communities, violent embodies, and people of color in general, but also through other forms of violence, through housing insecurity, through food insecurity, through all these different means, we're cut off from the future in various ways. And so reclaiming these ways that our ancestors that across the African diaspora, we've thought about time and space and the future is what our collective focus is on through different projects. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Rashida. Yes, I saw More Mother last summer, Celebrate Brooklyn. Oh my goodness. Get into it, y'all. Thank you. Next, I would love to introduce Joel Thompson.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joel Thompson, he, him. I'm coming to you from New Haven, Connecticut. I'm doing my doctorate at Yale School of Music. Yeah, and I'm a composer. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome, thank you. And last but not least, I would love to introduce Anthony Roth Costanza.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be on this panel. And I am an opera singer. I'm a countertenor. If you've never heard a countertenor, you'll be shocked and potentially delighted when you do, depending on how you feel about it. But basically, I sing in a very high range, which doesn't sound at all the way I look. And because of that, it's kind of very niche within opera, which is already very niche. So it's meant that I've had to carve my own path and find my own ways to forge a career. And that's how I got into what I guess I would call producing, which is, creating projects, making them happen. And over the pandemic, with the New York Philharmonic, I created something called the Bandwagon, which was essentially a pickup truck that went all around all 5 boroughs and engaged with different communities, different organizations, and presented pop-up concerts that were some of the first live music to happen in the country in the pandemic. And that led us to a beautiful collaboration with Gary Padmore and Genia Oliver Kratara and the whole New York Philharmonic team. I'm currently the artist in residence with the Philharmonic and singing an opera at the Met and producing several shows. So it's a joy to be with you all.
Thank you so much for ending with the word of the day, joy. And thank you to all 3 of our panelists for telling us so much about yourselves and giving us such a rich introduction. My artistic practice is rooted in theater and collaborative theater practices, and in working with and in communities who are endeavoring to create change within their homes, within their lives, and within their larger structures. Deeply influenced by folks like Augusto Boal, deeply influenced by folks like Ngugi wa Thiong'o, deeply influenced by the playwright Ntozake Shange. So to that end, my first question is about propriety. We're living through times of great peril and uncertainty. Is it even appropriate to center joy? So much of the art that is being made right now is centering the opposite of joy, is really focusing on the pain, struggle, the inequities that exist in terms of pain and struggle. Why do you think it is appropriate and necessary, some would say urgent, to center joy at a time like this? Whoever would like to start.
Well, I'll just say that I find that communicating through joy is a much more effective way to communicate. And it has to be a kind of authentic joy or genuine joy that you find within yourself, but that leading with that, and I've learned this from a lot of my colleagues, as opposed to anger, it opens people up to hear the story that you're telling. I think that as someone who stands on a stage and tries to sing this music that a lot of people aren't interested in, the joy that I take in that music is what allows them to connect to it often, and it communicates in that way, and also it engages us in the practical in an interesting way. What I mean by that, for myself at least, is that it keeps me looking forward toward what I can actually accomplish and what will actually bring me and those around me a kind of joy, and keeps me from looking backwards at the things that have frustrated me, that have taken away joy, that I feel spiteful about. So I don't know if that makes sense. But.
I can go and just say that it feels necessary because trauma is so repetitive and it really imprints our brain. And when it imprints our brain, it shapes our worldview. And when you have your worldview and the lens through which you see everything is trauma or pain or destruction or violence, that is how you will walk through the world, and it will continue to repeat. It passes down through your families. It literally encodes your DNA, right? Like, so it's just, it is necessary. Trauma and all these things are draining. There's nothing to replenish you if all you, if that's your sole focus, and it can be that. I mean, in the work that I do, I am confronted, less so in this policy position, but in my previous work, with trauma and pain on such a daily basis. And you can't separate yourself from that. Even just thinking about my own experiences, right? I can kind of like compartmentalize that, but at the end of the day, you can't walk through a rainstorm without getting wet, like it's just, you are impacted by that, and you can't. So in order to, if we as folks who are connected to social justice issues or to seeing the world be better, we have to have joy that replenishes us, because otherwise this work will take you out. It will drain you. I experienced a lot of burnout in my previous work that I didn't recognize as burnout. And so work that I felt really passionate about and wanted to show up to, I couldn't show up to it in the same way. I was tired, I was angry, I was exhausted. And so I had to step away for a moment and find and understand what joy meant for me, and how joy could be something to return to. It's not, I saw this amazing quote on Twitter the other day by a housing activist that said, happiness is happenstance, and then joy is forever. Joy is something that you can return to. So happiness kind of depends on your circumstances. It was just such a brilliant quote. I wish I knew the name of the person who said it, but the person who tweeted the quote was named Tara, who's a housing organizer. But just we have to have it, because otherwise this stuff will take us out, literally.
Yeah, that really resonates with me, what Rashida just said, the difference between happiness and joy being this more eternal thing that sometimes trauma can block us from. I find that in my practice as a composer, a lot of times my art functions as a way to be honest and express the deep pain and sadness and grief that I'm experiencing, so that I can find joy in my own personal life. And so by getting all of that emotion out onto the page, I then have access to joy. But what is expressed sometimes doesn't sound like joy, or doesn't communicate joy per se. And I find that it's still important for me to prioritize honesty in my craft. And, I don't want to perform joy. So by getting the pain out, sometimes through my craft, I can then follow that by writing a piece that is genuine, deeply felt, hard sought after joy. And I live for those moments. So, yeah.
Speaking of, I bet y'all are wondering, ooh, what is Joel talking about? What does the music sound like? So let's go to our first clip to get an example of what we're talking about here. Wow, that was beautiful. Oh my goodness, chills, chills, chills. Yes, the chat says this is wonderful. Thank you so much to both composer and performer who we happen to have right here in this room, in the Zoom screen. Breathtaking, and what a beautiful example of finding and extracting joy from a situation that seems to be lacking. Thank you. On to our second question. The first question was about appropriateness. The second question is about how joy factors into your artistic praxis. How do you center joy in the creation of art? How does it factor into your life and the intersections, the intersectional lives that we all live? Let's start with you, Joel, because you went last.
Okay. Well, I find joy in the process. I find joy in collaborations like the one that yielded the piece that we just saw with Anthony Rock Costanzo. And and with Tracy K. Smith. Tracy K. Smith, the poet who wrote those words, she had been writing poetry about Blackness and nationhood prior to this project. And she had mentioned in conversation to us that this was a sort of shift in her output. And this poetry was about love and longing and finding one's identity in the aftermath of loss. And it was such a healing project to work on, because it was also a shift in my output as well. And yeah, I find joy in those collaborations because I learn more about myself and about what I'm doing. The piece that started my composition career was Seven Last Words of the Unarmed, which takes the last words of unarmed Black men that were killed by authority figures and sets them to music in a very elegy-like fashion. And you know, there have been a lot of attempts since then to use the art to respond to things that have been going on. I set Maya Angelou's Caged Bird, and Langston Hughes' Hold Fast to Dreams, and Harlem, sort of trying to use the craft to process what is going on in my reality. And recently I premiered an opera based on the children's book, The Snowy Day by Ezra Jack Keats. And that's been very different from the pieces I previously mentioned because it's about a little Black boy having fun in the snow for the first time. And in that process, I learned how truly transformative working on a project that is solely oriented around joy and wonder and whimsy, how that can be healing for me as a composer. And so I'm now seeking projects that will allow me to still be honest about our present moment as it relates to Blackness and the sort of lived experience that we share, but also providing insight onto the complexity of Black interiority, as Dr. Eddie Glaude likes to phrase it, that we hold both joy and pain in the same hand. And so I'm seeking joy in that way in my craft. I feel like I've rambled on long enough. I'll give it to someone else.
No, we want to name Frankie Beverly and Mays for having acknowledged that long ago. And my grandmother for that being her favorite. It's like, yeah, joy and pain. Yes, and we'll get to that later. Who else would like to address this about your artistic practice and centering joy?
I can talk about one of the last projects I did. We were supposed to be here today with Justin Vivian Bond, who's an incredible performer, and Viv sends through me their condolences for not being here. They had a loss with a very close friend that they had to attend to today. But you know, I sing all of this you know, classical repertoire. And I'm really privileged that I get to sometimes work with composers like Joel to create it and to be a part of, you know, the new exciting stuff. But I get bored sometimes by the industry in which this classical music exists. And so right before the pandemic, I was trying to think about what my second album was going to be. And I wanted joy. I thought about, you know, going to, when I went to a Beyonce concert once, the excitement that I felt and the joy and the exhilaration that I felt. And then I thought about when I was a kid listening to this pianist, Victor Borga, who used to tell jokes as he played the piano, and how hilarious I thought that was. And, you know, I wanted to find a way to express that exhilaration and that joy in what I was doing, because on some level, I think I understood that when we feel that, it also disarms us. And so it allows us to go deeper into a place of, emotion. And so I was in touch with Justin Vivian Bond, who had been a longtime friend of mine, and we barely just worked together. And when we did, it was electric. And we put together a project that combined, they're an incredible cabaret and multifaceted trans genre and trans performance artist, and hilarious, brilliant, beautiful in all ways, but totally different from me. And so we put together a kind of piece which had highs and lows as the extremes. I sang very high, they sang low, and we both looked different from that in terms of the normal presentations of gender. And also I was uptown, they were downtown, you know, I'm short, they're tall, that kind of thing. And what we discovered by finding all the joy in the synchronicities of our two worlds and our two repertoires was ourselves in a way. You know, we ended the evening with Under Pressure, this song, which says that love's just an old-fashioned word, and love dares you to care for the people on the edge of the night. This is ourselves, you know what I mean? And that is what this project found. I realized that as a queer person in classical music, I can be very open about being queer and talk about it in the press and, you know, not hide anything. But my art doesn't always express my identity. And when I started to do this project with Vivian, I started to feel like I was really myself on stage and I was expressing myself. And that came with so much joy. It came with so much laughter. And it also opened it up into other depths of emotion, that the joy was kind of a funnel. And then it took us and the audience to other places.
Joy as a funnel, I love it.
Yeah, thank you to my co-panelists for those beautiful examples. I was going to share my screen, but I'm not able to, so I'll just talk through how I find joy in the work. In particular, through my collective Black Quantum Futurism, we do a lot of community engaged projects and projects that sit at the intersections of housing and futurism. And so one project in particular that's just an example of where I find joy in the work is a project we had called Community Futures Lab. And this was a community space that we built and opened in North Philly in a community that was undergoing severe and rapid displacement, particularly through the government. Sorry, these messages are, I'm getting messages in the chat. Particularly through the government doing a process called eminent domain, where they took about 1,300 properties from low-income homeowners and renters in a part of North Philly, that just North Philly in general, when you hear the word, anybody either inside of Philly or outside of Philly typically thinks of bad things. And even when you Google North Philly, right, like the pages back, right, you will find it's just bad things, violence, poverty, all the things, right? But in this community and in North Philly in general, and this is reflective of all communities, that's not the full story, right? But that's the story that gets put out there, and that in turn comes to justify then taking this community and redeveloping and pushing the bad element out. But this community was so beautiful. It had this just really amazing, brilliant, rich history. Malcolm X lived in this community, just murals aplenty that just showed the history of the community. Amazing civil rights activists. And often when that story is told about this community, what they focus on is this race riot that happened in the 1960s and the community never recovering from that race riot. But they leave out the part of the story where the government has actually disinvested from that community. So anyway, we opened this project called Community Futures Lab that was a year-long community space that was really just meant to amplify those stories and those narratives, but was meant to also think about how communities come together to create community, how they come together to create time together, not just being defined by some history or by a future that they don't have any control over, but how do they actually activate communal spaces and time together. And so that brought me joy. Like that brings me joy, like just going you know, it wasn't just like the bad stuff. Like we also just documented the redevelopment and all the bad things happening, all the traumatic things that were happening to people, and did what we called oral futures interviews with people that not just emphasized the history, but again, the future, and speaking into existence what they wanted to see come into the community. But we also did things like just attended community events where they were just like dancing and had the Black music, you know, our Black folks music on, and it was just beautiful. And so those moments of just being in community with people, like that brings me joy, like finding places and ways to amplify the voices of folks who we're in a struggle with, who I consider to be community or neighbors with, and just those moments. And it's draining and it's like tiring as hell to like go to these meetings and be in a zoning meeting and, you know, hang out with the old folks, but it's just beautiful. Like at the same time, it energizes me and it makes me want to do the work, and it returns me to the work and returns me to why, right, this work is important. So like without that joy, again, like I'm burnt out. I don't understand what I'm doing. I don't want any parts of it. But when you add joy into the element, it just brings the passion. It makes you understand why you're in it. And adding art to that, right? So again, as folks who are social justice minded or wanting to help our communities, that can take over because there's so much crisis and urgency and trauma. But adding that joy, it expands time for me, at least. It helps me, allows me to tap into what I call temporal abundance. So typically, right, in our culture, we're operating on the sense that there's no time is money, right? Again, this idea that Black folks just don't make it into the future is very much embedded, but when we bring joy into it, we can expand time. We can see time as abundant. We can see, so I'll stop there and maybe I'll get another chance to share some of my slides in a moment, but that's how I find joy in the work.
Thank you so much for that. Yes. It's a yes and for me, that joy, as you have all so beautifully articulated, joy and pain have a relationship. They're in relationship. We are socialized around this binary of either or, but joy and pain are in relationship. And Black culture, if nothing else, amplifies that aspect. I want to go to our second clip so that we can get some more examples of what we mean and of these brilliant artists.
Pressure pushing down on me, pushing down on you, no man asked for. Under pressure, it burns a building down, splits a family in two, puts people on streets. Do-da-da-da-day, do-da-da-da-day, do-da-da-da, do-da-da-da. Okay. It's the terror of knowing what this world is about, watching some good friends screaming, let me out, pray tomorrow takes me higher. Pressure on people on streets. Do-do-do. Now, okay. Chipping around, kicks my brains on the floor. These are the days it never rains, but it pours. Oh, do-do-do, do-do-do, oh, people on streets, people on streets, it's the terror of knowing what this world is about, watching some good friends screaming, let me out, pray tomorrow takes me higher, higher. Strong.
Oh, wow. It's all the blues, isn't it? Oh, that was beautiful. That was beautiful. And shout out and acknowledgement to Justin Vivian Bond. She would be here with us. And we want to acknowledge the yes and of joy and pain, and sitting in and with both as an artist, as a human being artist, as someone who is giving to the world, yeah, that we can't pour from an empty cup. So want to move into this idea of yes and joy and pain coexisting in relationship with each other. But first want to hold space for Rashida, if you want to share your screen now and give us some of those slides, since we're in an artsy kind of mood now.
All right, let's see if I can make it work. So yeah, I was just going to share a quick example of some of our artistic projects that are community-based. This project in particular is called a Black Grandmother Clock, and it functions as a oral futures booth. And this is in a community also in North Philly. This is not the same one I was just talking about, but a different part of North Philly dealing with the same exact issues. So building this in a community, brilliant, beautiful place called Village of Arts and Humanities in Philly. If you're ever there, please go check it out. But we built this Black grandmother clock as a way for the community members to be able to go up and record memories. The clock holds memories, and then the memories get put onto a sound shower that's out there. So I'll just play a quick clip.
Hello, beautiful people. Someday y'all gonna hear this. That was so nice. Someday y'all gonna hear that. When life gives you lemons, make the best lemonade ever.
Said, don't tell them where you got the strawberries from. I'm like, that was fly. You know what? I might have to give her royalties for that one, because
It's alright, I'm gonna publish it. And I got an empowerment journal coming out.
okay. No.
I'm such a baby. Like that just made me cry. Like just seeing Black women smile and just laugh, and Black folks, Black people in general just smile, like that just brings me joy. So just like those kind of projects and just being with community is just such a beautiful thing to me.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you were able to share that. That is the perfect example of what we mean. First of all, the Black grandmother clock of it all. The idea of time. So many of us don't have enough time with our grandmothers. How many Black grandmothers are left? You know, I think about that all the time. My own 89-year-old, nearly 90 grandmother. And this concept of time, seeing ourselves in the future. Shout out to Alicia B. Wormsley. There are Black people in the future. That idea that we must imagine ourselves in the future in order to make it happen is really palpable. And again, this idea that to acknowledge pain does not necessarily mean to live in that space. To acknowledge having gone through something does not necessarily mean staying in that space. We think about the New Orleans jazz funeral as an example of something that starts off sad, reverent, slow, and intentional, and ends up with a party celebrating death, beginning with mourning death and celebrating it. So my last question to you is, how do you find joy and acknowledge pain, both in life and in your art, when there's so much pressure to either lean into toxic positivity where we're like, good vibes only, or, you know, going along this binary, or leaning into what so many have labeled, you know, trauma porn, particularly in terms of artistic expression. So yeah, how do you hold space for the joy and the pain to be in relationship? Let's start with Rashida.
Yeah, I was just really thinking about what Joel's comments were about this earlier. They really resonated with me, but I'll just answer this. Maybe this is a little bit of a cop-out. But I just feel like for so long, Black pain and trauma has gone unacknowledged. Like, yes, there's the trauma porn and there's the slavery porn, you know, there's all those things, right? But what we feel, our own pain, the fact that we can feel things, right, has completely, like, right, because we have not been seen as human. We've been dehumanized in these ways that, you know, whether it's the trope of the angry Black woman, trope of the angry Black man, whoever it is, right? Like it's a trope that denies us full humanity, that denies us the ability to experience pain or just the fullness of our beings, of ourselves. So I think we just in the same ways that we have to acknowledge joy and we have to bring joy into it, we also have to acknowledge the pain because it's been denied to us. Just speaking from my own personal experiences, my relationship to understanding my own past trauma and all these different things has led me to compartmentalize emotions, right, in a way that is not healthy, in a way that, right, like doesn't let me feel my, you know, and I'm in therapy now. I'm so excited about that. I tell everybody. But just like I denied that part of myself because I put on this front that I have to be a strong Black woman. I have a child who I have to take care of and have to put on a resilient face for the world because I'm always afraid of something happening to my child. I have 3 younger brothers who are young Black men who at any moment can be arrested in the South, you know, so just all of these different things, like we have to acknowledge it. Black men have been denied the ability to cry, to be human, to be emotional for so long. And so we have to hold both things. Otherwise, we're denying ourselves our full humanity. And it goes deep, it runs deep. It's not just us, or it's not just a perception issue. It goes to medical issues, right? The fact that, you know, people think Black people don't experience pain. That our skin is different, that our skin is thicker, right? Tropes that go all the way back to 1600, 1500s, right? So I think it's just necessary. And again, it's a little bit of a cop-out. I'm not really answering the question directly, but I just think we have to hold both because we've been denied full humanity, and pain and trauma. Like if we don't acknowledge it, it just will not heal. It won't go away.
Thank you, Rashida. Thank you for that. I'm also thinking about Under Pressure and the beautiful wailing voices that fill us with joy and pain at the same time. I wanted to, that piece brought me so much joy and tears. So I wonder what your thoughts are.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, my parents are both psychologists, so I feel I've been in therapy my whole life, and I am grateful for that. But I think that when I feel pain and when I tap into a kind of pain sometimes that my community feels, there is a real joy in expressing that pain. Because as you say, when we have to sit alone with our pain, when we have to feel that it's, you know, oppressing us in some way, then that's when it starts to become toxic. And when we express the pain, and especially when we can express it in art and in these ways that are beautiful, then it becomes joy. We can be alchemists in a way, and we can spin our pain into joy. And so that's why I think art is so important. And it's so important for artists to also spend time educating young people, because when they come into contact with art, I mean, I'll just tell the story that, you know, when I go into work with middle schoolers, I'm doing some more of that next week. I actually could show you a little video if we have 3 minutes towards the end. If not, don't worry about it. But you can see that as I work with these middle schoolers, I talk to them about emotion. When they can connect to the emotion through the beauty of music, it's really a universal thing. And you see that they have an outlet to express all that they're feeling that I don't know that they're finding in other aspects of their life. I think the other thing about art and beauty in the context of pain and trauma is that sometimes it gives us enough distance to actually feel comfortable engaging with our pain. And that makes it a feasible thing to do.
Wow. Firstly, Joel, we're getting into, you just dropped so many gems. Firstly, the pain becomes joy when we let it out. We are alchemists as artists. Letting it out changes that pain into joy. That was such a beautiful thing. And then secondly, this idea of it changing you and the circumstances and the situation around you, that we know this from, you know, a lot of marginalized communities, that it is necessary to come together and to let it out rather than holding it in, to explore the full range of our humanity through expressing joy, pain, anger, sadness, sometimes all at the same time. Really beautiful sentiments, and I think real gems for us to walk away with. And I think about expressing the full range of our humanity and how for so many of us that makes us dangerous. So Joel, I wonder what you think.
Yeah, I think about this a lot. When I am sad, when I'm in the doldrums, I don't necessarily turn to happy hunky-dory music. I turn to music that can reflect my emotional state, and then I feel less alone. It reminds me that there's nothing new under the sun. And so this pain that I'm feeling, at least the artist who is expressing this sadness understands in a way. And I feel like that's transformative for me. And so to hold joy and pain together, I think I think of community and how community a lot of times we hold those things together. You mentioned the New Orleans jazz funeral, and there's so many other traditions in which and ceremonies and practices in which we can hold those spaces together. And so as an artist, I'm looking for balance. And Dominique Morisseau has a quote where she says, joy without balance is dehumanization. And I think the opposite is true. Like trauma without balance is also dehumanization. And so finding that balance, I think, is also important as an artist. And I think that balance is important, especially now, because as a Black artist today, I feel an onus, a responsibility, an obligation to still speak the truth about our present moment. There are forces at work very different than it was 2 years ago in the middle of the pandemic, going to school boards and saying that we can't talk about Ruby Bridges or Rosa Parks or any of the struggles of generations past and to the people who are still present. We literally can't mention this to our children for fear that it will make people feel guilty for who they are. But when that is happening, I feel like artists then feel an obligation to then say, if your child is not going to hear this in school, you're going to hear about it in this piece that I'm going to write. But then also wanting to orient our gaze to the future, like Rashida is doing in their practice, and that future depends on our hope in the present, and to create something that inspires hope in this present moment, but is also honest about what we are facing in this present moment. I think in trying to do those things together, we hold the joy and pain in the same hand. And so that's what I'm trying to do. It's I think one will try and fail, but then it's not really about perfection. It's about the process and the practice. And so I look forward to continue doing that.
I love it. I think you should narrate things, by the way. We all just need to hear your voice. It's soothing. Speaking of joy, I just feel so calm. Do narration, please. So I want to turn into young folks and include you in this conversation. Firstly, Anthony's comment about having distance from the trauma in order to process it made me think about Euphoria. Who would have thought I'd bring up Euphoria in this discussion at the New York Philharmonic, but I am. And it made me think about Lexi's play and how Lexi needed distance. Lexi went and wrote a whole play and the community was better for it. And first of all, the beauty of theater. Again, I'm a theater person, so I'm going to shout it out. And that us theater folk are adept at processing, at creating distance, right? Through characters, through a number of methodologies, creating that distance that allows us to process hard things. Want to also invite young folks to think about this idea of policing joy and how your joy may be policed or may have been policed in terms of how we're socialized, what's acceptable joy, right? I know that in high school, when my friends and I got together and were joyous, again, we were not necessarily seen in a favorable way. So the very expression of joy and pain, for a lot of us, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So thinking about, for young folks, how you are finding your joy in difficult times. And I want to turn to the New York Philharmonic education community and read some of the responses that you have submitted here in response to this prompt. Sometimes you got to fight for your right to party. What are some things that bring you joy or have brought you joy in the past? And how have they impacted your identity or even how you're feeling as you type this? So just want to name some things. Netta Parkinson says, what brings me joy? Many things that bring me joy are that I can wake up each morning and continue to do the things that I love and shop. I wake up every morning with the possibility of what I want to do. Yes, I know it may be complicated or I may have an obstacle to overcome. I also have joy when I think about the life I may have when it comes to the future after college, to opportunities and adventures I can take. Happiness is when I meet new people, get to know them, and learn new things. Another thing that brings me joy is yarn, my grandma's hobby. I get to make, and we'll have to see what the rest of that is because it's cut off. But wait, let me expand this post. No, there's nothing after I get to make. So I imagine you get to make scarves and all kinds of things, maybe even sweaters. This is an anonymous comment, what brings me joy. I think I normally gain joy from small things that I get excited over. For me, that mainly consists of anything I can just take the time and use to just relax. I like things that involve music, even if sometimes music does make me frustrated when playing. It just becomes something that I overcome, that over time I am able to just find moments of happiness and growth in. Thank you, Julissa. That is a beautiful sentiment. So sometimes things that are difficult, frustrating, can also bring us joy. Katie Davis says, what brings me joy is my family and friends. They are always there for me and I'm always there for them. So we know we've got each other's back. Another thing that brings me joy is music. Music always brings my mood up. When thinking about how my family and friends impacted me, they have made me a better person. And lastly, there's so many, you guys, we'll put the link in the chat, and for the Facebook community, we'll share it with you as well. I can think of many things that bring me joy. My family brings me joy. The opportunity I have to attend college and being in good health brings me joy also. Living in a country where we don't live in turmoil due to war brings me joy. When considering what brings me joy, I seem to recognize things that may seem small that we take for granted daily. Thank you, Denisha. So I want to turn to this community and ask you in the Zoom room, what's bringing you joy these days? And particularly what has brought you joy throughout the pandemic. Some people found joy in making sourdough bread, or they said they were. I didn't see many loaves. I just heard people saying that they were going to learn to make sourdough. I haven't seen a whole lot of sourdough. Some folks, had other ways that they found joy. Took up new hobbies, learned an instrument. Took some risks. How did you find joy in the pandemic? You can either unmute yourself, come on camera, or put it in the chat. So Raymond says, getting to see our students face to face or even mask to mask again now is bringing me joy. Yes, even mask to mask is better than Zoom. No offense to Zoom, we're grateful for Zoom, but yeah, the in-person stuff is bringing joy. Other naming of joy. Spending time alone, listening to music and journaling. Yes. Spending time alone. That's a premium during the pandemic, especially if you're a parent. Yeah, so we want to think about the things that have brought us joy during a difficult time, because as Anthony says, we're alchemists. We can transform painful, difficult experiences into joy through a process, going through, not necessarily around. I love the way that this panel has named, has encouraged us to avoid bypassing our pain in search of joy. This panel has named the way that you embrace and go through the pain and arrive at joy. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Janine says, reading and bringing myself on dates. Now let's talk about it. How many people have taken themselves out on a date? Seriously. And if you have, has it been recent? Do you do it with regularity? Do you have it calendared, your date with yourself? Are you cheap when you go out on a date with yourself as opposed to other people? Come on now. Deborah says, me. All right, let's be like Deborah. I love it. Let's be like Janine and Deborah. Saida says, learning about myself and constantly working to become the best version of myself and bringing out the best in the community. Yeah, that's the ideal. Learning about myself, constantly working. Wow, we learn more, we get new information about ourselves or about the world, and we change. We are alchemists. Ariana says, creating art through painting and sketching brings me the most joy when every day is filled with science. Absolutely, science is all around us. These are beautiful. I hope y'all are writing this down. This is a beautiful blueprint for finding joy in difficult times, finding joy through times of stagnation, when you feel like your creativity is not bubbling, it's not percolating, it's not carbonated. These are ways that you can, carbonate your creativity. I want to also hold space because we just have 5 minutes left for questions from the audience for our panelists. If you have questions for our panelists about their art, their artistic practice, and or how they're finding joy, please put it in the chat. We have investing in myself and appreciating the small things in life. Now, several times folks have named appreciating the small things. We tend to focus on the macro. I've got to graduate, I've got to get this thing, I've got to finish this project, I've got to meet this deadline. But what about the small things? The acknowledgement you got, the smile that you got, the encouragement that you got, someone that asked you if you've eaten today. Those are the small things, or maybe it's just me. Those are the little small things that seem insignificant that can really bring a person joy and help to sustain and fuel a person through difficult times. Question. Hearing this panel is reminding me how important joy is and how much I needed this. Yeah, I think we all needed it to recognize and acknowledge and name for many of us who are activists, who are giving to our communities, who are creating art for communities, for folks who are unlistened to, that takes a toll, and you are deserving of replenishing your cup and filling it with joy. I want to shout out Adrienne Maree Brown and Pleasure Activism. I wish a copy of that book could rain down on all of you, because that book really is another testament to the ways that centering joy makes us better activists as well. Better artists, better activists, better people. So we've heard and seen many ways and iterations of reclaiming joy. I want to turn it over to our panel just for some last words around what they're going to take from our conversation today into these days to come and into the next weeks, months, maybe the year. Let's start with Joel.
Okay. Well, I'm inspired by everyone on this panel. I really admire the work of Rashida, and I really want to get to know your work a lot more. I'm interested in this Afrofuturist perspective, and I'm going to be looking into. I'm working in opera and wanting to know what an Afrofuturist opera would look like. And so I would love to talk with you more. So I'm finding joy in this meeting. And Anthony Roth Costanzo, I mean, what can we say? I love collaborating with you. And the idea of alchemy, of transforming present pain into joy, is something I'm definitely going to take away. And so, yeah, looking forward to more collaborations and working together for sure with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Rashida?
Oh, sorry.
No, go Anthony, you're ready.
I was just going to say that I first wanted to acknowledge Toya has given us so much joy throughout this whole panel, just, radiating it to us. So thank you for that. And thank you for leading us so elegantly through it. And yeah, I mean, it's just so inspiring to have these conversations. One thing I find about the time we live in is that because of the digital world and because we're all so busy now, we got to respond to all the emails and the texts and all of this stuff. We forget to actually reflect on these things. And so today gave us a chance to think about that, and hearing these brilliant panelists talk about their work is so inspiring to me because, I get so stuck doing what I'm doing, and that's not so interesting to me all the time, so I'm much more interested in what all of you guys are doing. So thank you.
Yeah, I echo that. I feel like I get siloed into my world and my work. And so it was just great to break out and hear other perspectives. You all drop gems. So I'm still processing. I can't even summarize it all. It was just gorgeous and uplifting. And I really appreciate everyone's perspective and want to thank you, Toya, for your energy. It brought me up. I'm tired and just got off panels and doing all kinds of things. And so just appreciate your energy and just how you approach this, and really am grateful to be in conversation with you all. And yes, Joel, please reach out. Let's do this.
Y'all, we planted the seeds for an Afrofuturist opera today. Not only did we get wisdom and really a blueprint for finding joy through difficult times, but we have an Afrofuturist opera to look forward to, and it was born right here in this Zoom room. Not only did we have a great discussion, but we got some work done and planted the seeds for some future art. Listen, we did this today, y'all. I want to thank the New York Philharmonic. I want to thank our panelists, and I want to thank you, students and folks in our Facebook community, for joining us and for joining us in thinking about joy and centering joy and the ways that it could benefit us all, and especially the world. So thanks. I'm going to turn it back over to our host.
Thank you, Toya.
Hi, thank you so much. That was amazing. Thank you, panelists. It's not often we get to think about joy and make that sort of central in our experience. Students, I just want to say to all of you, you are always fighting, you are always struggling with classes, with justice, with honors on top of it all. If there is anything we can do to make joy more central in our program for your lives, please tell us that. Thank you, Gary, Jeannie, for making this happen. I don't know if you want to like turn on your camera for a second and wave. Thank you so much for all your work and panelists. So wonderful. Hey, there you are. Thank you all. And students, as you go, maybe if you want to just turn on your camera, wave, clap, thank our panelists for a moment. Thank you all, so grateful. Thank you, Toya, you're amazing.
Thank you all. It was great to be with you.